I still recall the echo of plastic chairs scraping marble as I left the conference room at St. Xavier's. No one spoke to me as I passed the row of glass-paned doors. My hand kept shaking around the folder, bioAI project proposal, its corners now damp and crumpled in my grip. Professor Naik, leading the review committee, had been almost gentle. "Ajay," he'd said, voice tinged more with dismissal than sympathy. "AI for rural enzyme diagnostics is optimistic, but our department needs practical work." He looked at the older doctors ringed around the table, many nodding their assent, and signed the rejection letter right then. I don't remember forms or handshakes, just the soft thump of my research proposal sliding under the stack. Outside, the late June air in Mumbai rose around me like fever. I tried walking briskly past the canteen, but friends, well, the ones who used to be my friends, were already waiting. Mayur, always the bluntest, called after me, "Oi, doctor. Dreamer, Nobel Prize coming this decade or next?" I didn't reply. I didn't even look back. The university's walls were streaked with the rain from last night, caramel puddles already drying pale on sun-warmed tiles. Every smell struck me: spiced tea, wet earth, the bitter resin from trees hemming the corridor. I wanted to run, but forced myself to walk. I passed the display board hung with the department's golden graduates. Names on glass plaques, none of whom had ever dared anything like bioAI, at least not here. The irony bit into me. That evening, when I reached home, my mother had already heard. Word traveled fast in our building, a squat concrete block in Sion, where gossip ran up the stairs faster than any internet connection. My aunt, her flat was above ours, was there too. She poured herself into the conversation without looking at me. "Beta, why don't you apply for a pharmaceutical job?" "Like Yishi's son? They keep calling him to Singapore. All this computer robot talk. Who listens?" My jaw clenched hard. Right then, anger flooded through me, white hot. It shoved aside embarrassment, even despair. I focused on the scuff marks on the linoleum, swore I would not break in front of them. Mother tried, in her own quiet way. "Ajay, sometimes it's better to take the sure path. Maybe start with something safer, then later." I couldn't hear it. I shut myself in my room, pressed my forehead against the window grill, and watched the dusk creep in with the monsoon clouds. Down on the street, neon flashed from the sweet shop, rickshaw horns cried, and my city moved imperturbably on, unmoved by my private humiliation. For months, life went on, just as before, except for the dullness that had crept over it. My rejections from local grants piled up. I spent long nights hunched over our slow desktop, reading obscure research papers, hacking together code with open-source tools, dreaming harder instead of less. Sleep meant little. Talking meant less. My father, always quiet, started leaving job announcements in my room. Vacancy, research assistant, chemistry, Walkhart Labs. I didn't say anything. He didn't expect me to. Even my younger sister joined in, prodding. "When are you going to use those brains for something real, Ajay Bhaiya?" But every time someone joked or prodded, my anger sharpened, but also, below it, a cold serenity formed. I made myself study harder, try more. It was trance-like, mechanical, except for those rare, bright flashes when I realized a line of code matched a problem in protein modeling, or when I found an international forum where another student in Singapore had tried something similar. Applying abroad hadn't even been a serious thought at first. The fees, the forms, the impossibility. But sometimes you shout at a wall long enough and find a tiny, unnoticed crack. I sent a single bold application, a raw version of my AI protein diagnostic idea, to a research internship in Switzerland. I didn't hope. I told no one. One night, 4 months later, as rain hammered the window and the power flickered, my Gmail dinged with a message. Dear Ajay, we are pleased to offer you the Zurich Institute Summer Fellowship. For the first time in almost a year, my legs nearly buckled under me. I screamed properly into the pillow. I told my family the next morning. They were muted. My father simply said, "Zurich?" My mother, after a beat, "But this is only for 3 months?" A pause. "And the ticket money?" But once papers arrived and the emails became official, even my aunt started telling neighbors I was going to Europe. It didn't matter that none of them really understood the work. I let them have the story. Zurich was nothing like Mumbai. The air smelled of pine, pastry, and distant cold. Alone in the spotless labs with machines shaped like alien beetles, the thrill of purpose returned. The Swiss mentors cared only about ideas and results, not who my family was or what job I'd take next. I worked 12-hour days, Skyped home rarely, and no one, not even my homesickness, could distract me from the pulse of discovery. We got promising results. The AI models outperformed expectations. My supervisor, Dr. Hartman, asked me to return for a doctorate. Years slipped by. Each time I came back to Mumbai for a week, I felt like a visitor in my own childhood. The familiar alleys now shadowed by a gulf of experience. Cousins would laugh. "Switzerland must be nice. They serve you bread and cheese every day." My old friends seemed wary, as if proximity to my intensity might infect them. But I'd grown. Faster, I sometimes thought, than I could understand. My anger grew brittle, my serenity deeper and more detached. I kept working, pushing forward, knowing most of my family and community still saw it all as an eccentric phase. That was fine. The years wove together. Doctorate completed, a celebrated Nature paper, conference talks in Tokyo and Boston, a long, lonely winter in Zurich made easier by lab camaraderie, and the realization that we'd made something unprecedented. Our AI diagnostic, trained on rural Indian blood data, could, with a speck of sample and a phone camera, identify 6 enzymatic markers, malnutrition, anemia, liver issues, in minutes, at less than 1/10 the cost of Western assays. The news went public. My phone was flooded with spam. I felt anxiety flicker. The anger and serenity both squeezed by another, unfamiliar emotion, anticipation. The weeks before leaving were spent rehearsing the demo, translating glossaries into Hindi and Marathi, coaxing the device to handle both lab samples and the rough homemade ones I remembered from my old school's science fairs. The Zurich team cheered me on. My parents wavered between telling everyone and worrying the local media would ask them questions. My sister sent cryptic texts. "Don't forget to bring Swiss chocolate." The Innovation in Healthcare Summit was held at the Oberoi. The lobby was all glass and gleam, sepia portraits of benefactors, and flowers ribboned perfectly along the walkways. I'd not told anyone back home what my talk really was, just professional event, boring technical stuff, really. But the conference program went up on social media. Within a day, my phone rang breathlessly. "Ajay, I saw your name." It was my aunt, then Mayur from college, then the secretary from our society's apartment committee. Everyone suddenly remembered. On the day of my demonstration, I wore my best dark blue suit, the one my mother had insisted was too Western for Indian weddings. My badge was generic, just A. Rao, Zurich Institute. The auditorium was cooled to freezing and every seat filled. My time slot was late afternoon. As I walked to the lights, my mind drifted briefly back to that other room with Professor Naik, the plastic chairs, the slow burn of dismissal. I felt angry again, but it was distant, mixed now with something like compassion. I began quietly. 2 photographs, children from Maharashtra villages, one malnourished, one thriving. I showed the old diagnostic process, weeks, blood tubes, expensive urban labs, and then my device, a phone clip-on, smaller than a matchbox. built on code I'd written in that tiny Sion bedroom. Faces turned attentive. Officials, doctors in white coats, youth in khaki jackets. I explained data, accuracy, rural field trials. Then I called for a volunteer. Several hands shot up. I chose an older woman from the city council. She pressed her finger to the sample strip, slid it into the slot, and waited. My device whirred, a small robotic note amid the hush. 30 seconds. Her results flashed on the projector. Normal hemoglobin, slight vitamin D deficiency, risk of type 2 diabetes. The data matched the hospital's last official report down to the decimal. A beat, then applause. The bureaucrats murmured. The students took photos. After the session, the head of Maharashtra's public health initiative shook my hand. In the lobby, I saw two faces I hadn't expected. My mother, sorry perfectly pleated, clutching her handbag, and my aunt, all silk and spectacle frames. Next to them, Mayur, wearing a Data is King t-shirt, had that familiar lopsided grin. Ajay beta, my mother said, her voice trembling with something I'd never quite heard, pride edged with disbelief. It is really your machine? On TV they said your name. My aunt pushed forward. Such a small thing, and it tells everything? The doctors are saying your computer will help lakhs of poor? I found I couldn't speak. Something built up in my chest, a pressure